while they light up. And it looks like they're almost lit up because once they all light up, we get the feedback, and that would be right now. So the feedback's gone. I managed to eclipse it, which is fortunate. So we won't have to hear the feedback. Let me just grab my notes here and we will get started. If you're joining us on YouTube, you know the drill, like and subscribe. Our guest today is Mitch Joel, founder of 6 Pixels Group, an advisory, investing, and content company focused on brands, commerce, and community. He's been called a visionary, digital expert, and community leader. He's also a passionate speaker who shares insights on business transformation, innovation, and marketing. He spent nearly 2 decades building, running, and selling his agency to WPP, and he was most recently president of Mirum, thank you, a global marketing agency operating in 25 countries with close to 3,000 employees. I am pleased to have him with us on this podcast. Mitch, welcome.
It's great to see you, Eric, and I apologize for my finagling of the wires. I should have gotten them out of the way prior to going live, but we're casual today. It's beautiful.
Well, you've got a very nice background, and my background is partially real and partially virtual.
I could tell.
And I know a lot of people frown on a virtual background. Why is that?
I do. I frown on virtual backgrounds. I just feel that if you really think about body language and how we connect and what makes us really get into stuff, we're missing a big part of the picture already with Zoom. I have a microphone in front of my face. My ears are covered. These are all bad signals to human beings that I'm listening and I'm here for you and I'm a part of it. We've become a little accustomed to it because we watch, sometimes we watch those TV shows that are actually just radio shows and they're in the studio. But overall, these are not great signals for I'm open to communication. And for me, the virtual background is another barrier that is, to me, inauthentic. It just doesn't feel as real as what it is. Now, I have a lot of empathy and I've grown quite a bit throughout this pandemic where I really don't care what people do because everyone's going through their own challenges and their own worlds. But my general theory is if I can keep it as natural and as real and organic as possible with the best technology to make it feel like I'm as close to you as possible and the people listening, that's what I want to do. So yeah, I do frown a little on virtual.
Well, I think you may have actually convinced me to go down to the storage chamber and get a piece of art and put it behind me.
Yeah, that's all.
Instead of the virtual art that I have behind me now. Today in 3 acts, how small business can compete in the age of Amazon, the creator economy, and the laws of virality. When we return, stay with us. Mitch, let's start with the important stuff. What musical recording artists are you listening to these days?
Fair question. I've been on this kick of just making playlists, which I've never, back in high school, I probably made mixtapes for girls that I wanted to date and stuff, or just for myself to have. And I find myself making playlists.
On Spotify?
Actually, Spotify is the one platform I don't have. I started off on Apple Music, iTunes, whatever it was. And then recently I've been really hooked on YouTube Premium. And with YouTube Premium, you get YouTube Music. And I had a corruption in my Apple Music. So I thought, well, I'll start constructing some stuff in YouTube Music. And it's been great. The playlists on YouTube Music are amazing because if there's a video for the song, they show you the video. And so I can't tell you how exciting it is when I made my perfect for me 80s mix and was able to see all of these videos at the same time. It's been a real pleasure. In terms of new music, I do a lot of, I don't play a lot, but I have another podcast where I interview bass players and I'm a big fan of the electric bass. And so I've been listening to a lot of bass driven music. One artist is Pino Palladino, who has a new album out. Pino is well known for playing with John Mayer. He's well known for playing with Nine Inch Nails. He's well known for being in The Who after John Entwistle. So a very fascinating musician and great player. I've been listening to another artist called Liquid Tension Experiment, which is very, very progressive and heavy, mixed with fusion and jazz. I tend to play in that world of really weird music. So since Chick Corea has very recently and sadly passed away, I've been going back to a lot of Chick Corea stuff, a lot of Return to Forever music. And then at the same time, I'll often just go into explore and see what new albums are out and check out who's doing what. But in general, I'm usually listening to non-vocal, weird instrumental jazz fusion stuff.
I used to go to the trade show Le Web in Paris every year,
Sure.
and I met a young Parisian guy there. I remember who turned me on to like David Guetta and all these pop artists that I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of. And I still have to hit him up once a year for a screenshot of his Spotify.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to listen to your playlists, are they available?
No. No, I'm one of those people that I'm actually really paranoid that I'll get hit by a car by accident and somebody will see my playlist and be like, oh, he listens to that. So no, I keep it all under wraps.
Yeah, I get it. I had a Wilson Phillips tape in
Right. So
college,
you don't be
and let
caught
me
with
tell
that.
you, when the roommates were around, I never played it.
Yeah, you
Okay.
gotta hide that stuff. But in general, if you go to notrouble.com, which isn't my site, it's this guy Corey who built it. It's the largest site for bass players. And there's a podcast section there called Groove, which is my show that I've been doing every single month for over 5 years. And I interview really fascinating people who tell really incredible stories. And some of them are super famous bass players. Some of them are famous bass players who people have never heard beyond like what amps they use and what pedals they use. And so I've tried to take the application of my business podcast, 6 Pixels of Separation, and apply it to the electric bass by just telling really in-depth, long-form stories. And it's been a lot of fun. So if you really want to know the diversity of my musical taste, you can get it from there.
Now, Mitch, my son is an aspiring jazz pianist, and I know it's tough to make a living as a musician, right? You were a musician, right?
No, not really. I mean, I studied music post-secondary before I realized really quickly, because tangentially, I was also a music journalist. I realized really quickly I wanted to be on the business side, not on the music side of the music business. So I don't really even play all that often. These are really just, props because I like having them. And sometimes I'll fiddle around, but I really don't play. I'm more interested in the sound it makes. And, I made a face when you said he's an aspiring jazz pianist, only because I get asked often to speak to younger people. Usually it's my friends who have kids because they want to get into writing or journalism. And I think I have the same reaction, which is it's a great and fulfilling creative life. There's no doubt, but it's really hard to make a living and it's a real struggle. And it's not about, I don't think it's about how you define success in the pursuit of real skill, which if you're a jazz pianist, you're really pursuing something very different than what the average person is probably trying to pursue, but it's a hard life. And I feel like there's this perception that, well, you get some pickup gigs and you just play here and do this. There's a lot of people who think that they can do that and are doing that. And it's a challenging life. It's challenging life to be a writer. It's challenging life to do any of this. Journalism is really tough too.
So I'm working on, building my real estate portfolio to insulate him.
That's the
That
way to
when
do
I'm
it.
gone, he can make a living. How did you wind up transitioning from music journalism to marketing?
I don't know that I ever did. When I run into my peers from my music business life, they're always like, "How did you become this person?" And for me, I never felt that. When I started writing about music, I had a fascination with brands. I had a fascination with retail. I had a fascination with building community and how fans are engaged. Very quickly, I published my own magazines and I was responsible for the production of it, the advertising, the copy. So marketing was always there. I think people think marketing is just advertising, but it's not. It's product, price, promotion, place. It's the 4 Ps. And I just always thought I was in the business of media to one degree or another. Even as the internet came to be something in the early 90s, people were like, wow, you're on this internet thing like really early. it didn't feel like it to me. It felt like it was another form of media. And I was always very passionate about media. When I was young, I would, prior to the internet, I would buy magazines, physical magazines, and read them cover to cover. And I wanted to know who the writers were and where it was produced. I didn't just want to consume the content. So my fascination with all things related to media and brand building and fan building, it was always a part of it. So for me, when people say that, the line seems a lot more linear, I think, to those who are like, you were in the music business, then you were in the internet world, then you were in the marketing agency. I don't, it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like this natural progression for me of pursuing that entire world of understanding how people connect to brands, how they connect to content, how technology changes that relationship. And to this day, that's pretty much what I talk about. I talk about that intersection of brands, consumer behavior, and technology.
So obviously, you work with a lot of big brands. And, given the scale of those operations, there's a lot of smart people focused on how the enterprise can leverage digital media to drive growth. But given that most businesses are small businesses,
Yeah.
who probably don't have the resources to hire someone like you, who probably have had their head down just trying to run their business, and now next thing they know, they've got to figure out digital. What advice do you have for small business owners who are trying to kind of stay alive or even compete in the age of Amazon and Airbnb, Uber, Grubhub, these major tech brands?
I mean, one is, the truth is I don't really do that anymore. I had an agency. I sold that agency, like you said earlier, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 3 years ago, I left. And since then, I primarily have been out on the road speaking. Now I do a lot of that through the webcam because of COVID. So I don't really deal with large entities, other than maybe that's my audience when I'm speaking. But when I am speaking, it's also a lot of small and medium-sized business owners. It's a lot of B2C. It's a lot of B2B. It's a mixed bag of the entire world. Now, with that, we're recording this at the end of May. Whenever it comes out, it comes out. We're doing this live too. If you're a small business and you haven't figured it out during this, I don't think you're gonna. I think we're done. I think you've decided, you voted yourself off the island, because we had this moment in time where the world shut down, and everybody from our K-1 kids who are suddenly doing online learning, if they were lucky and privileged, all the way up to our eldest of elderly who had to learn how to use FaceTime because we were sliding them iPads into the door and learning how to order their food online or whatever it might be, had what I call this great compression. That all the things you and I had been speaking about in the realm of digital had manifested itself in a very, very quick period of time. And then over the haul of the pandemic became a form of behavior, a definite form of behavior, where we will probably go back to a semblance of quote unquote normal, but in that normal will be a lot of variance in terms of our behavior. So if you think about it in terms of someone who's much older, maybe they won't do as much grocery shopping physically. Maybe they'll just go for their fruit and veg or their baked goods, but everything else, because the convenience of it, will now be delivered now that they've become accustomed to the process. Maybe they won't go to the library as often, but do curbside pickup or do online ordering, whatever it might be. And the truth is if there's a small business today that's watching this conversation and hasn't had to completely shift their model and figure out how to do it this way, my guess is that they're not in existence, or they really are technology proof. I don't know what business looks like that. We have a small little market just down the street from where I live. And day one, they were shut. Day two, it was, well, email us your orders. We'll confirm back and forth by email. And within 2 weeks, they were up on Shopify. So if that's not the, what we would talk about, like the real transition, that real digital transformation, yeah, I don't know what is. So if they haven't figured it out during this pandemic or haven't needed to, maybe they don't need it.
There's nothing like a new Vegas hotel. A new Vegas hotel on opening weekend the living is easy, man. Things are inexpensive. They're giving it away. They
I
want
think
they want to
so.
become the hot property.
Okay.
So they're
Yeah.
having these parties and all this great stuff. And then as they become the hot property, things start becoming a little bit more expensive. There's not as much freebies, not as much giveaways. And I think about like digital businesses in growth mode versus mature digital businesses, right? A mature digital business, like, I don't know, the cable company that sells you your internet, they're squeezing you for every last nickel any way they can. And then you've got, these upstarts, like Grubhub, they're giving away free deliveries and this, that, and the other to get people on board. But you see that as they become bigger and as they become dominant, they tend to become more aggressive in their business practices. Do you have any concerns or advice for small businesses that maybe are reliant on some sort of digital intermediary for access to their customers now, but those companies are in growth mode? I mean, you even think about Shopify. Shopify does not charge a commission on a sale, but they could. And I actually have a client who had products removed from the Shopify store. They make novelties because they didn't comply with the terms of service. And so now they're defecting for big commerce. You see that as these companies become bigger, they become more conservative in their business practices, they clamp down more. What, if anything, could a small business do to control their digital destiny without being reliant on a third party?
The analogy that I would use is I'm Canadian, and it would be very easy for me, if I were still running an agency, which I'm not, to have a lot of US clients and use the foreign exchange as some kind of demonstration that my margins are really good. And I think it's the exact same thing for that story, which is if you think your customer acquisitions are really low because some new startup is delivering them for a fraction of the fee, and that's what you're building into your model as efficacy and growth, you're going to be pretty sad. If you're going to use a third-party merchant platform, whether it's going on to Amazon and thinking that it'll always be this way or that they won't rip you off and build their own basic brand on top of the success you had, again, you're living in a bit of a dream. So the simplistic answer is build that moat, build something that is indefensible so that it's yours and yours alone, and it's nobody else's would that be defensible, could argue. And secondarily is build the direct relationship with the customer. Yeah, it's funny that we're here. And we're here in a weird way because when digital happened, the real narrative that I had, and you were there early days too, Eric, was, well, now you could have what I called real interactions between real human beings. That was the promise of digital. And I think it delivered on it at a multiple. Where I may have been wrong is it became monopolistic in terms of access. So you think about the FANGs, right? Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, etc. And we went from a world of, 3 or 4 television networks to a strange amount of monopolies. Strange amount. Scott Galloway calls them unregulated monopolies, is what Scott Galloway calls them. So if you're not bulletproofing the model of what you're getting and letting all that other stuff, your fees, your positioning as gravy, you will eventually have erosion. And if you're not really building a direct relationship with the customer through newsletters, content, storytelling, direct response marketing, whatever it might be, they aren't really your customers. They're another business's customers, and you're a supplier. For many, that model has worked. I mean, there's this famous saying out in the world that the only thing worse than selling to Walmart is not selling to Walmart. So when I think of the nuances of what you're saying, I'll tilt my head to the side and say, at the end of the day, Shopify isn't a platform. Shopify is a software. the software that you use to monetize. If you feel like it's not delivering against what you need, there are other softwares that will help you sell something, shopping cart, bulletproof hosting, and some nuances in terms of apps and fanciness. Options are abound. You can build it yourself. There are many enterprise level e-commerce businesses that aren't on Shopify. I happen to be very bullish on Shopify because I know the founders, proud because they're Canadian, and just love the company and have bought publicly stock because I believe in them. It's done really, really well, and I hope it stays that way. And I believe in it because when it started, the ability for any small business to have e-commerce was very expensive and very complicated. So if you are growing, it's kind of like when I speak to my kids about homework. You're doing this, like you're doing okay, like you're doing okay. But the amount of work and the speed is going like this, getting harder and harder and harder. And so that gap in between is going to get more complicated if you don't start picking up speed and working harder. And I feel like businesses see these as solutions, and they don't see them as ways in which they may have to fix the business as things evolve. So what if you are a third-party merchant on Amazon and they decide to run a basics against you? What if Amazon is suddenly broken up and it changes the dynamics? What if the Google algorithm changes and you're not there in search? What if, and these stories are stories that I hear every day throughout the world. I mean, you mentioned we might talk about Clubhouse and social audio. When I go into some of these rooms, it's the number, they keep changing the algorithm. Like, well, if you're counting on the algorithm to bring you audience, I don't know if you're doing the work off platform to really make this work for you. And so what's the short answer? What's the TLDR to that whole thing is you have to build the direct relationship with the customer, and you can't rely on all the nuances of the solutions to provide you with your margins and growth.
We're talking to my good friend, Mitch Joel, about digital transformation strategy for small business. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the creator economy. Stay with us. Mitch, what is the creator economy and how can a small business participate?
Yeah, I mean, we got a new buzzword, don't we, Eric? We've got the creator economy. We've got the passion economy.
Should we tip our hat to Mr. Joe Paluzzi for the creator economy term?
I don't think that Joe pushed that one out there. I think he's embraced it. I mean, I think we can accredit Joe with
content entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think we can attribute the idea of content marketing as a real engine of commerce to Joe and Robert Rose and the other people who were involved in the early days of content marketing world and Content Marketing Institute. But I don't know if we could give him the creator economy. I don't think that that's his. It seems to me like the creator economy is a newisher word, which again, you could use creator economy or passion economy. And it's driven by this idea that if you're on a platform that has monetized or looking to monetize, so think about Twitter, YouTube, you could think about Clubhouse being a newer one, TikTok would be another, that the creators who are creating the content are the ones who are being compensated in a more fair and equitable way. One. Two would be that these creators are also being compensated by the people who are actually following them and connected to them. And so what's happening is it isn't that all the money is running to the Twitters and TikToks and Clubhouses of the world, but a lot more. And then they would compensate these creators through ad revenue and models like that. But now that these creators are the ones who are really building that direct relationship with the customer and having them pay them directly. So we also see it in new platforms like Substack would be another great example from the newsletter space. What's to know as a small business? Maybe as a small business, you already are in the creator economy. Maybe that is how you currently make your money. Is it an option as a way to monetize content and storytelling? It could be. I roll a bit, not like I don't eye roll to the point of straining my neck, but I eye roll a bit when I hear the term, only because I'm always trying to figure out what do I want this content to do. So when I think about my content, and I've been creating content for a long time because we've known each other a long time. So in the long before the early 2000s, but let's talk about the early 2000s when I launched 6 Pixels of Separation, which is the blog and the podcast. What was I trying to monetize? Never had an advertiser, never had a sponsor in all the years. The monetization of that content was somebody would call and either want me to speak on a stage or would want to work with the agency. It was lead generation. It was business development. I didn't want to cloud any of that messaging with another business or brand or ad or anything. I wanted them to hear, hey, this is Mitch Joel from 6 Pixels of Separation. At the time, it was the Twist Image blog or the Mirror blog. Now it's just 6 Pixels of Separation. And if you want more information or think this is smart, you can figure out how to find me. I'm not that hard to find. What I see in the creator economy is this interesting place of trying to sell everything. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of people will do really well with it, but I still look at my own creator economy as I want people to hear that content, connect with me, sign up to my information, whether it's my writing or my podcast, whatever it is, I don't really care. And then when they're having an event, they think about having me to speak. When they are looking to raise money, they think of me as being a potential investor. When they're thinking of growing their business, maybe they want to have me be an advisor or sit on the board of directors. That's good enough for me. Now I'm working on a startup that will have another angle to it, and that still fits within what I'm doing. But to me, that's my monetization. My economy happens outside of the content I create. And I think the creator economy is really about the content being the monetization too. And by the way, I'm not saying I'm doing it right or my way is the right way. I may very well come to the realization that I should be charging for this content. It's really good. And there's an audience that would pay for it.
So you mentioned Scott Galloway. So I imagine you're a Prof G listener. He talks a lot about, the whole idea of the creator economy being a lie. And that really, when it comes to making money from the media through ad-supported channels on TikTok or YouTube, that really just a sliver, just the smallest fraction of a fraction is actually making the money. And everyone else is just throwing content onto the platform for YouTube to make the money. And he kind of pulls the covers on that every chance he gets. Beyond those small businesses that are consultants and selling expertise, if you are a business selling a product or maybe a more conventional service like, I don't know, a restaurant or a boutique hotel, is there a creator economy play for those organizations? And if so, what is it? Is it the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I fully agree with Scott. I think the numbers speak to that, but that doesn't mean that there's a lot of people making a small amount of money creating content that's enough for them is one side. And I'll give you the spoiler alert on my keynote is I tell the story of Norm Harris. Norm owns Norman's Rare Guitars in Tarzana, California, and he sells used guitars, not even new guitars. And if you're a young person trying to find someone to mate with, the old days of picking up an acoustic guitar by the fireside isn't what happens. If you're young and you want to find someone to mate with, you create a beat in GarageBand and upload it to SoundCloud. So that whole industry has gone through a massive transformation. And there's been a bit of an irony with it because during the pandemic, sales of physical instruments did increase and people found this newfound interest in playing guitar and bass and drums and keyboards, and that's great. But in general, this is a really tough business, small strip mall retailer selling a product that could be anywhere from $8 to $50 to hundreds of thousands of dollars because it's vintage. And Norm is in his early 70s. It's not like he's a YouTuber or a TikToker. But his sales associates were saying to him, hey, we should tell some of our stories on YouTube. We have really interesting people that come through the store and sit on these couches and play these used guitars. Some of them being people like Tom Petty, who passed away, or Richie Sambora from Bon Jovi, or used to be in Bon Jovi, or Joe Bonamassa. And Norm hemmed and hawed and said, okay. And And these videos have gone clearly viral to no one's surprise. And if you look at Norm's YouTube channel, which has been, sub 10 years, I think there's 500,000 subscribers, which is insane. And the most watched videos aren't really the famous people. Sometimes it's a person like me bringing a 12-year-old son into the store, and the kid is just amazing on guitar. And Norm's like, hang on, let me get my iPhone. And he's introducing the world to all these local artists and other artists. So I interviewed Norm because he's viral. I mean, he's got a massive YouTube channel at NAMM, which is the North American Musical Merchants Association, massive event in Anaheim, California every year, hundreds of thousands of people. And one of the stories he tells is that his YouTube channel is viewed and consumed so much that the amount of money he generates on the channel on ad support is more than he was traditionally spending to get attention, local radio, newspapers. The second component of that story, which is really interesting, is he started doing this guitar of the day. So every day around this time, he drops one of his sales associates just playing a guitar or bass or whatever it might be. That instrument gets sold within a couple of hours somewhere in the world. It's got a global customer database now that are watching, and these videos will get 15, 20, 30,000 views just to see like somebody playing these beautiful old guitars. And so now he's built a direct response engine on YouTube, which is almost unheard of. But the punchline here isn't even that. The punchline is that recently he launched something called the All Guitar Network. And the All Guitar Network is essentially the golf channel for guitar players. For a small monthly fee like Netflix, you get access to this incredible library of videos, interviews, instructionals, vignettes, etc. And he built this entirely digital only Netflix of guitars that he runs on a skeleton crew. I'm going to guess it doesn't look like it's a massive crew, and that he's getting subscribers for. And both of those arenas obviously feed each other. But to me, it's a great example when you talk about a small of small businesses of what you can do. Now, why does this work? One, it works because Norm is an interesting character. Two, it works because he hires interesting characters. Three, it works because the customers come in and really have a passion and knowledge for his product. Four, it works because there are people all over the world who love this sort of stuff and will go into the comments and say, no, you're wrong. It's not a sunbird top. It's a red, blah, 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 whatever it is. It's not a 1963 and the neck's not original, blah, 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 blah. So you have this thing where people are almost one-upping each other. There's so many components of it that make it so extremely compelling that even someone like me, who is a casual listener, will subscribe to the channel and want the channel and look forward to the time when I'm anywhere near Tarzana, California, that I can go in and maybe get a t-shirt. I'm probably not going to buy a guitar or bass. And so he becomes this hub more so than the physical store ever could. Now you're saying, well, could the local grocer do that? Probably. Think about food culture. Think about people coming to your city. Who is the hub of restaurant food, cooking, lifestyle? Like you can just go out on whatever you want. Could the local dry cleaner do it? I don't know. There might be a story to tell about cleaning and time of year and tips and things, and that people might, I don't know. So is it for everybody? Maybe not. But is there any real niche that I think of where I really struggle to find a way for somebody to do something with it? No. I think that if Norm can do it, anyone can do it.
And as a content entrepreneur, not as someone who sells guitars, but as someone making money from content. I mean, if you think about, the vast, world of small businesses out there, do you think anyone can really be a content entrepreneur? Or is it really as tough to pay the bills from content as it is from being a musician?
Okay. So now we have to have the philosophical debate, you and I. So like, if you're not,
okay.
if you're not,
I don't know where you're going with this. So you
if you're not watching the video, there's this bass behind me. It's a PVT 40.
Okay.
They say it's the heaviest instrument of all time. Like it weighs more than a black hole. Am I a bassist? No, I play the bass. I can play the bass. I know how, but I'm not a bass player. So can anybody write? I think our friend Ann Hanley would say everybody writes. That's the name of her book.
Right.
Is everybody a writer? I don't think so. So can businesses try things? Yes. Is everybody going to be intuitively great at it and be able to deliver on it? No. Does that mean they shouldn't think about it? No. So the way I reconcile those thoughts is when I sit down with the business, and my creative directors at the agency used to hate this because I would use it on big clients too. I'd say, look around the room. Who likes stuff? Because you have text, images, audio, video, long form, short form, live or pre-recorded. What excites you? Because the truth is, for me, it's long form audio and it's long form text. I can't stop writing. I can't stop interviewing people for my podcast. I can't say no to people like you who ask me to be on their long form content. This is my thing. Would I prefer if the cameras were off? Yes. I don't like video as much. I prefer not having to do the ring lights and shave and get ready and make sure everything is right. Some people love video though. And so unless you can really look at your business and go, what type of content do I like? And can I formulate a view around what this is? It's going to be a slog. But if you're really good on the quips and you really like taking pictures, like Twitter and Instagram are going to be great for you. They're going to be fantastic. If you can take your phone and shoot some fun things, TikTok's going to be great for you. You're going to do great, or Instagram or Facebook or whatever it might be. So I don't believe we are at a loss of finding, is there something somebody can do? I think the challenge is in finding the audience that really wants it, likes it, and will accept it. That journey is a whole other journey, because to a certain degree, you can be the funniest comedian in the world, but if the audience isn't laughing, you're probably not the funniest comedian in the world. So, and we know, we've heard these stories a million times, like the comedian's comedian, the writer's writer, the marketer's marketer. That's fine if that can give you things. So I could be the marketer's marketer, which some people have accused me of being, but that's okay because I'll get referrals to speak, to advise, to do other things. I'm really okay with that. But when I think about content and storytelling at a brand level, especially a small business level, I'm always like, what's the thing you can't stop doing? We talked about my podcast. I believe it's the longest running business podcast in the world. I don't say that to brag. I just say that because I think it is. I could be wrong, and I'm happy to be proven wrong. But I can't stop doing it. I have a million conversations I've yet to have that I want to have, and I'll just publish them. I never look at my analytics, by the way. I have no clue how many listeners or downloads I have. I've never looked. I have no clue. If you like it, that's great. If you don't, maybe you'll like next week's. If you don't, maybe you're not for me. So I'm creating it from a selfish standpoint, but I do know that connecting it like Lego bricks into the other things that I do, it has built a platform for me. And that platform for me has enabled me to do for myself very successful things. It's enabled me to be very successful by my personal definition of what success is. Do I believe that anybody has that in them? Of course I do. I mean, that's why we have social media, because every day somebody else is doing something interesting. And the most interesting players to me are the ones who do it over and over and over again. So I never liked the viral thing. It's great if you can have something go viral, but it was never something that was attractive to me. I was always way more interested in seeing the people who were building the biggest YouTube channels over the people who had the most views.
We're talking to Mitch Joel about the creator economy. And when we come back, we're going to go inside the Clubhouse craze. Stay with us. Joel, why did that was terrible? Hold on a second.
Schwartzman, what do you mean?
This is a false start at 12:39.
It's my fault. I have two first names. Just remember it's Mitch, and I won't call you Schwartzman. It's like we're on the football team together.
Coming back at 12:39. Mitch, why did Clubhouse take off?
Clubhouse is somewhat of an anomaly to me in the sense of, if we think about the trajectory of technology, the easiest thing we can transmit across the pipe is text. Then it's images, then it's audio, then it's video. Then we know it's easier to do it natively on your tech and upload it versus streaming it live. So streaming video live would be the most complex form of technology that we could deliver. And we were able to do that very successfully for many years. And then suddenly this weird anomaly of live audio came to be. Now, I should say that we've had live audio for a while, but we haven't had it in this way where it's live with everybody at the same time. So for those who don't know, Clubhouse is what's being called social audio or drop-in audio. You create a club or a room and multiple people can be in the room. And then there's another section of that room, which is very visible, called the stage. The stage is where anybody can speak. So you mute your button, you unmute your button, and then you can speak using your smartphone and have conversations with people on different topics or just different groups of people. So Clubhouse has become fairly popular. I think it's waning a little bit. We're not seeing the growth that we thought we would see traditionally when we see the trajectories of these types of new social media platforms. It took off exponentially during the pandemic. And I should also say that during the pandemic, it's still in closed beta. It was primarily iOS only. It's now being accessible on Android. I believe they've accumulated about 1 million users on Android as they're opening it up, but it's still in private beta, meaning it's invite only. And I'm avoiding the question a little bit because what you want to hear is, well, it became very popular because we're all in lockdown and need to connect and speak to people. And it's maybe waning in popularity because the world's opening up again. And I don't believe that to be true. We had people binging Netflix series long before we had a global pandemic. And the numbers for platforms like Netflix and YouTube and others increased significantly during the pandemic, which was normal. We saw that. But I don't think it's dropped off significantly now that the world has opened up. It's maintained. We've also seen in other moments in time, new media platforms come along and do exceptionally well and grow exponentially. So there's a curiousness as to what's happening with Clubhouse and why is this happening. I do believe that the pandemic inspired more people to be hanging around and being open to conversations. This lack of the water cooler, this central center of the city, the shopping mall, these places we could no longer go, the park kind of, and have these conversations with people and strangers. It made it very, very attractive. The fact that it was a many to many versus a one to many is very attractive. And so while I don't know how I feel about Clubhouse short term, I'm bullish on the idea long term. Because when I think about what's happening right now, this is a great example. We're recording your podcast and we're streaming it. But I'm now recording audio podcasts in Clubhouse and having that real live audience interaction, not me reading comments, but people actually coming up and speaking and having conversations. So it's a really different way to look at how you can scale conversations. And I also think it's tough to comment on right now because it's so different and hard to understand. Like when you're a moderator, I'm not just interviewing Eric Schwartzman and then inviting people up. There's multiple people there that can be a part of the conversation in different ways. And there's a way to do it that is really, really different than what we've seen with traditional audio. And so the analogy that I've been giving people is it's almost like you're a conductor when you moderate a room and everybody on the stage is playing an instrument and your job as the conductor is to make sure that a good song is being created. But it's hard to do that because there's no history, meaning I don't have a producer who's adding in Eric and then Sheila and then Nancy. It's just, you never know what you're going to get. So you can shift over to somebody or someone starts talking and you're suddenly well off topic. So it's interesting, it's different, and I think it's yet to figure out its real legs. So right now, again, another analogy or story that I give is it reminds me a lot of the early days of television, which was just primarily people reading radio with a camera fixed on them till they figured out like, we could do more with this. And I think that more with this is starting to come through in Clubhouse, but it's not prevalent. It's not its own thing yet.
Conversations on Clubhouse, I'm not as active on it as you. My participation has been limited, but a lot of the conversations that I have heard sound like the ones we were having in the early days of social media, where people are talking about building like-minded audiences, connecting with like-minded people. They're talking about the wisdom of the crowd. But, we saw, at least in the US on January 6th, the crowd ain't so wise, and that didn't end so well. And we see also, sort of in this quest to extend session time, the social networks, as Scott Galloway says, have committed to an enraged to engage business model. Why wouldn't Clubhouse ultimately follow the same business model that Facebook and Twitter followed to extend session time? And should we have learned our lesson building the audience that we did for Facebook and Twitter with these other new upstarts that are just potentially going to do more of the same?
Well, you could make the argument that Clubhouse's only real opportunity at this point would be monetization through sponsorship and advertising. You could. They've decided to go the road of let these creators ask the audience for some form of money. And right now they're not taking a percentage on it. They will have to. They've taken a lot of money with a very massive valuation being led by Andreessen Horowitz, who probably want a large ROI or return on this. There's been rumors that Twitter tried to acquire them for $4 billion and they rejected that. That could look pretty ugly if things keep going the way it's going on Clubhouse, that they might have been wiser to have taken that. It's a hard thing to answer because at any given moment, I would say there's probably sub 100 rooms happening, and the vast majority of them have a handful of people in them. So what are we trying to monetize? What does that look like? Scale would be the answer. Facebook did a lot of pony shows in the early days about how they have more reach than the three large broadcasters. My argument back was cumulatively, but Facebook isn't one thing with many channels. Facebook is a billion small networks. And are we actually monetizing that? And the fact of the matter is they were through the data collection and data usage, which we could agree with or not. I'm open to that debate as well. What is Clubhouse really trying to solve for? When I hear the founders speak, and they do this every Sunday, it's something they call town hall, I'm not sure the inventors know what the invention is for yet. And I would say that with every social media platform, everyone spent the bulk of time talking about how new and different and inventive it was and what we should be doing on it. And then eventually people came on it and thought, oh, this is a publishing platform. I can just talk about my business in this way and I'll do that. And so the rooms that I tend to spend the most time in are rooms that aren't talking about Clubhouse. They're just topics of interest, whether it's trends, whether it's jazz music, and people are using it as I think the way it's intended. I think the use case will shift as people get more acclimated to this group discussion type of vibe. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but those were the reactions I had as you were speaking.
There was a really interesting cover story in the New York Times, I don't know, a month ago, maybe 6-8 weeks ago. It was the New York Times Sunday magazine. And I remember the title of the story was FaceTime. And it was a story about Addison Rae, who's a TikTok star, a young lady who does makeup demos and has built a business by partnering with makeup companies. And towards the end of the story, it was a long form piece of beautifully written. And towards the end of the piece, they get on the subject of empathy and how important empathy is to her in building an audience. And I see a lot of content entrepreneurs using a sort of, I guess I want to say kind of self-serving false empathy to build audiences.
Yeah.
To me, it seems really insincere. I mean, and almost kind of nauseating, but it tends to work, and these folks actually establish these big audiences based on this sort of psychological manipulation, which is really unsettling to me. I don't have the stomach for it, but then I wonder, if you're going to be successful, on Clubhouse building a room. Is that what you have to do?
No, clearly it's not what you have to do. And again, I used a different thinking around how to answer questions like this. So if I'm creating content, I have a couple choices, but it's primarily two things. One is, am I trying to create something so that I'm perceived as being on the cover of the magazine? Or am I trying to write the most compelling story in a magazine? And that's how I see content creation. It's literally those two frameworks. Did somebody create and publish this because they want to be famous? They want people to acknowledge them and recognize them, look how great they look and look how smart they are? Or are they creating content that is primarily so that the person consuming it gets an exorbitant amount of value out of it, makes them better at their work, it makes them better at their life, whatever it might be? So I'm biased because I spent my life in journalism and I spent my life being on a byline. I wanted the story to be on the cover. I wanted the story, the subject within the story, to have the spotlight. I want to be the creator of these ideas underneath it, the purveyor of it, the curator of it, whatever the word might be. And so it's no surprise that when a new social platform comes out, it's like everyone's on the ocean and they're like, we missed that last wave. That was TikTok. Oh, okay. Well, we'll wait for the next one. And that next one was Clubhouse. So many people jumped on it. I'm a social audio influencer now. I'm going to accumulate a lot of followers, whether it's authentic or not. And then I'll be able to monetize that as my business. And I see it happening, and I see it happening a lot. And I would say that there's a primary drive of these types of content creators on platforms like Clubhouse. Does it work? I don't know if it works. Are they monetizing these rooms and getting all these off-platform sponsorship deals? And maybe it works, and maybe it works for them. Maybe it satiates them. I don't want to spend my time chasing likes or attention. So they call this the attention economy. I like the value economy. I want to be constantly creating something that is going to give the audience value. So when we were talking earlier about thinking about your content in terms of text, images, audio, video, long form, short form, live, I believe that is a tremendous amount of value right there. Like if anybody listening to this is in a small business thinking about this, literally steps aside and starts plotting against that, there's real value in that. It's simple, it's easy to do, but it will change your life because you're not suddenly trying to create videos on TikTok and then realizing, I hate doing short form videos. It's not my thing, right? So that to me is the line in the sand. Now, will I be dismissive of the people who have built tremendous followings and from that a level of wealth from just creating like that? And it's, I'll sell you how to be smart a million times over. I mean, we're in the business of marketing. How many MLM businesses are there that make my eye roll? I will teach you to be rich. That whole model that I will coach you, I will show you. And the only proof that I have that it works for me is that I was able to accumulate followers, whether they're authentic or not. And a lot of that is really questionable in almost all the platforms. And so I go back to something I wrote about in my first book, 6 Pixels of Separation. It was something I was writing on my blog of the same name for years before. I don't really care how many people I connect with. I really care who I connect with, though. And so right before we recorded this, I was actually in a Clubhouse room with 20 people, but 5 of them, probably the most impressive people I met. One of them in particular is someone who is recognized as being the leading thinker in new business models around innovation. They're never going to get 6 million followers on Clubhouse. They've got sub 1,000 followers, but they're more impressive to me in terms of value output than somebody who is only on Clubhouse to get you to DM them so they can send you some funnel-based system that they will lock you into some form of 20K coaching or masterclass. And I'm not being dismissive of that model. It works for some. It's not of interest to me. I like the substance.
Mitch, Joel, always a pleasure. I always learn so much from you. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Happy to do it. Great to see you. And thanks for your time, Eric.